17-year-old Marcus Holloway strode into the Riverside County Superior Courtroom with the casual confidence of someone attending a minor inconvenience rather than his own murder trial. His lips curved into a barely concealed smirk as he surveyed the packed gallery, his eyes lingering on the tearful faces of his victim's family with something approaching amusement. He had spent months constructing an image of invincibility, convinced that his youth, his charisma, and his family's standing in the community would shield him from the consequences of the unspeakable act he had committed. He had calculated every angle, manipulated every conversation, and believed with absolute certainty that the system would bend to accommodate him. But what Marcus Holloway could not have predicted, what his narcissism had blinded him to, was that the most devastating testimony against him would come not from a prosecutor or a detective, but from the one man whose approval he had spent his entire life seeking, his own father. The quiet suburban community of Riverside, California, had always prided itself on being a place where families thrived and children grew up safe. Tree-lined streets stretched through neighborhoods, where houses displayed manicured lawns and welcomed neighbors with open doors. It was a town built on the illusion of predictability, where violent crime was something that happened in distant cities, not in backyards where children rode bikes and families gathered for weekend barbecues. On the evening of March 18th, that illusion was shattered forever when 23-year-old Jennifer Martinez failed to return home from her evening jog. Jennifer was a recent college graduate, a bright and ambitious young woman who had just accepted a teaching position at the local elementary school. She was known throughout the neighborhood for her infectious smile and her habit of waving to every person she passed during her runs. That evening, she had left her apartment at approximately 6:30, following her usual route through Riverside Park, a popular recreational area with well-maintained trails and adequate lighting. When she had not returned by 8 o'clock, her roommate, Sarah Chen, began to worry. By 9, that worry had transformed into panic, and Sarah made the call that would set in motion one of the most disturbing criminal investigations in the county's history. The initial search was conducted by patrol officers, who walked Jennifer's usual route with flashlights cutting through the gathering darkness. The park, so welcoming in daylight, had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and uncertainty. For 2 hours, the search yielded nothing, the silence of the empty trails offering no clues to her disappearance. It was not until just after 11 that Officer Raymond Torres, searching a wooded area approximately 50 yards off the main trail, discovered what everyone had feared, but hoped they would not find. Jennifer Martinez lay motionless in a shallow depression beneath a cluster of oak trees, her body partially concealed by fallen leaves that someone had hastily scattered over her. The scene was one of brutal, senseless violence, an attack so savage that it spoke not of an opportunistic crime, but of something darker, something deeply pathological. The crime scene investigators arrived within the hour, transforming the peaceful park into a hive of organized activity. Portable lights illuminated the area with harsh, clinical brightness, and yellow evidence markers began to dot the ground like grotesque flowers. The medical examiner, Dr. Patricia Valdez, conducted her preliminary assessment with the detached professionalism required of her position. But even she, a veteran of countless death investigations, found herself disturbed by the ferocity of the attack. Jennifer had suffered multiple blunt force injuries to her head and upper body, and the murder weapon, a large rock found approximately 10 feet from the body, was stained with blood and hair. There were signs of a struggle, broken branches, disturbed earth, and defensive wounds on Jennifer's hands that told the story of a young woman who had fought desperately for her life. The forensic team worked through the night, photographing every angle, collecting trace evidence, and mapping the scene with meticulous precision. They recovered DNA samples from underneath Jennifer's fingernails, fiber evidence from her clothing, and a partial shoe print in the soft earth near the body. The evidence suggested that her attacker had been young and strong, the pattern of violence indicating a rage that went beyond the act of killing itself. Detective Sarah Blackwood, a 15-year veteran of the Riverside Police Department's Homicide Division, stood at the edge of the crime scene, her eyes scanning the area with the practiced gaze of someone who had learned to read violence like a language. She knew that whoever had done this had crossed a line that most people never approached, and she understood that finding them would require not just investigative skill, but an understanding of the darkness that could exist in the human heart. The notification to Jennifer's family was delivered in the early hours of the morning, a task that Detective Blackwood had performed too many times but never grew accustomed to. Jennifer's parents, Miguel and Rosa Martinez, received the news in their modest home 15 miles from where their daughter had been found. The detective's words, careful and compassionate, yet unavoidably final, struck them with the force of a physical blow. Rosa collapsed into her husband's arms, her anguished sobs filling the small living room, while Miguel stood frozen, his face a mask of incomprehension as his mind struggled to process a reality that should not exist. Their daughter, their brilliant, beautiful daughter, who had overcome every obstacle to become the first in their family to graduate from college, was gone. The emptiness left by her absence was not just a void, but a howling chasm that would never be filled, a wound that would never heal. In the days that followed, the Martinez family found themselves trapped in a nightmare from which there was no waking, their grief compounded by the knowledge that someone had deliberately, maliciously stolen Jennifer from the world. The investigation moved with swift urgency, driven by Detective Blackwood's determination and the resources of a department that understood the importance of solving such a heinous crime quickly. The DNA evidence recovered from underneath Jennifer's fingernails was processed as a priority, and the results came back with a profile that was entered into the combined DNA system. While the team waited for potential matches, they pursued other leads, canvassing the park and surrounding neighborhoods, interviewing joggers and dog walkers who frequented the area, and reviewing security camera footage from businesses near the park's entrances. The break in the case came on the fourth day of the investigation, not from a database hit, but from a witness who had been reluctant to come forward. A 15-year-old boy named Tyler Brennan approached his parents with a terrible burden of knowledge, confessing that he had been in the park that evening and had seen something that now haunted his dreams. He had been there with friends, engaging in the typical adolescent rebellion of drinking beer in the woods, when they heard what sounded like a confrontation on the nearby trail. Through the trees, illuminated by the failing light of dusk, Tyler had seen a figure he recognized, someone he knew from his own high school, standing over what appeared to be someone on the ground. The figure had been Marcus Holloway, a senior at Riverside High School, and Tyler had watched, in frozen horror, as Marcus looked around frantically before dragging something into the woods. Tyler and his friends had fled, terrified of being discovered, terrified of what they had witnessed, and had spent days wrestling with the moral weight of their silence. When Detective Blackwood sat down with Tyler in an interview room specifically designed for juvenile witnesses, the boy's testimony poured out in a torrent of guilt and relief. He described Marcus's appearance that evening, the dark athletic clothing, the panicked energy, and most crucially, he provided a timeline that matched the estimated time of death. With this eyewitness account in hand, the investigation pivoted sharply toward Marcus Holloway, and a background check revealed a young man whose outward appearance of normalcy concealed a pattern of concerning behavior. Marcus Holloway was, by all external measures, the epitome of privileged suburban youth. He was a senior at Riverside High School, a varsity athlete with above-average grades, and the son of Robert Holloway, a respected attorney, and Catherine Holloway, a prominent real estate agent. The family lived in one of Riverside's most affluent neighborhoods, their sprawling home a testament to financial success. Marcus drove a new car, wore expensive clothes, and moved through his high school's social hierarchy with the ease of someone who had never been told no. But beneath this polished surface, investigators discovered troubling indicators that painted a far more sinister picture. School counselors, when interviewed confidentially, revealed that Marcus had been involved in multiple incidents of bullying, displaying a particular cruelty toward students he perceived as weaker or socially inferior. Teachers described him as intelligent but entitled, someone who challenged authority not with thoughtful questions, but with dismissive arrogance. There had been an incident the previous year involving an accusation of assault on a female student at a party, but the complaint had been quietly withdrawn after the Holloway family's attorney became involved. Most disturbing was a police report from 2 years ago, when a neighbor had found their cat dead in their yard, killed in a manner that suggested deliberate cruelty, with Marcus having been seen in the area around the time of death. No charges had been filed, the evidence circumstantial, but the pattern was there for those willing to see it, a trajectory of escalating violence that had finally culminated in murder. With sufficient probable cause established, Detective Blackwood obtained a search warrant for the Holloway residence and an arrest warrant for Marcus. The execution of these warrants was planned with tactical precision, the department understanding that they were about to intrude on one of the community's most prominent families. The arrest took place on a Tuesday morning, just as Marcus was preparing to leave for school. The detective arrived with a team of uniformed officers, their presence in the quiet, affluent neighborhood drawing immediate attention from curious neighbors. Robert Holloway answered the door in his business attire, his expression shifting from confusion to outrage as he read the warrant. He immediately demanded to know the charges, his attorney's instincts activated, his voice carrying the authoritative tone of someone accustomed to being in control. Marcus was called downstairs, and when he appeared, his reaction was not fear or surprise, but annoyance, his face registering the same expression one might wear when interrupted during a favorite television show. As Detective Blackwood informed him of his rights and placed him under arrest for the murder of Jennifer Martinez, Marcus rolled his eyes, a gesture so casually dismissive that it sent a chill through the seasoned detective. He offered no resistance, no protests of innocence, simply a bored compliance as handcuffs were placed around his wrists. The search of his bedroom yielded crucial evidence that would form the foundation of the prosecution's case. Investigators found a pair of athletic shoes whose tread pattern matched the partial print found at the crime scene.
"Jury, about my son's positive qualities," Robert said, his voice steady but strained. "You're asking me to paint a picture of a good boy who lost his way. But I can't do that. I won't do that. Not anymore." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Richard Stern's face went pale, his eyes widening in alarm. "Mr. Holloway," he interjected quickly, "perhaps we should take a moment." "No," Robert interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "No more moments, no more delays. I've spent 17 years taking moments, making excuses, and look where it's brought us." Judge Reynolds leaned forward, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Mr. Holloway, I want to make sure you understand that you are under oath, and that anything you say can impact your son's case. Do you wish to consult with counsel before continuing?" Robert turned to look directly at the judge, his eyes clear and resolute. "Your Honor, I understand completely. I'm an attorney. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I know exactly what this means. And I need to do this. I need to tell the truth. Not the version of the truth that makes my family look better, but the actual truth." He turned back to face the jury, ignoring his son's attorney, who was frantically whispering objections. "The truth is that my son is not a victim of circumstance or a broken home or an undeveloped brain. The truth is that Marcus is a product of my failure as a father, and that failure didn't happen in a moment. It happened over 17 years of choosing the easy path, of protecting him from consequences, of teaching him that rules were obstacles to be circumvented rather than boundaries to be respected." Marcus's face had transformed from bored indifference to genuine shock, then rapidly to rage. His hands gripped the edge of the defense table, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles stood out along his neck. For the first time in the entire trial, he was fully present, fully engaged, because for the first time something was happening that he had not anticipated and could not control. Richard Stern stood, his voice urgent. "Your Honor, I must object. This witness is clearly not in a proper state of mind to testify. I request an immediate recess so that I can confer with—" "Objection overruled," Judge Reynolds said firmly. "The witness has indicated he understands his position and wishes to continue. Mr. Holloway, you may proceed, but I caution you to answer only the questions asked." Karen Mitchell, recognizing that something extraordinary was unfolding, remained seated, her expression carefully neutral, but her mind working rapidly to adjust her strategy. This was not the testimony she had expected, but it was potentially more powerful than anything she could have elicited through cross-examination. Robert continued, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke truths he had suppressed for years. "When Marcus was 8 years old, a neighbor's child came to our door crying, saying that Marcus had pushed him off his bicycle and stolen it. My wife and I knew it was true. We'd seen the bicycle in our garage. But instead of making Marcus apologize and return it, I went to the neighbor and suggested that their son was mistaken, that he had probably just left the bike somewhere and Marcus had found it. I gave them money for a new bicycle, and I told Marcus he was lucky I'd handled it. I taught him that money could make problems disappear." The courtroom was absolutely silent, every person present leaning forward, captivated by the raw confession unfolding before them. Several jurors were taking notes, their faces reflecting a mixture of sympathy and horror.
When he was 12, a teacher called us in because Marcus had been caught cheating on a test. Not just cheating, but he had stolen the answer key from her desk. Instead of letting him face suspension, I made calls. I used my position, my connections, and I had the incident removed from his record. I told Marcus he needed to be smarter about covering his tracks. That's what I said. Not don't cheat, not this is wrong. I told him to be smarter about not getting caught. Robert's voice cracked slightly, but he pushed forward, the words pouring out like a dam had finally burst. When he was 15, a girl at his school accused him of assault at a party. She came forward, filed a complaint, and my first instinct wasn't to ask if it was true. My first instinct was to protect him. I hired investigators to dig into her background, to find anything we could use to discredit her. We found out her parents were going through a difficult divorce, that she'd been struggling in school, and we used that. We implied she was unstable, seeking attention. The complaint was withdrawn, and I felt proud of myself. Proud. I had protected my son from consequences, and I felt like I'd done my job as a father. Marcus half rose from his chair, his face twisted with fury. "Shut up! Just shut up! You're supposed to—" Two bailiffs moved quickly toward the defense table, and Judge Reynolds' gavel came down like a thunderclap. "Mr. Holloway, you will control yourself, or you will be removed from this courtroom. This is your only warning." Marcus sank back into his chair, but his eyes remained fixed on his father with an intensity that bordered on murderous. The mask of indifference had completely been shattered, revealing the rage and entitlement that had always lurked beneath. Robert watched his son's outburst with an expression of profound sorrow. "And there it is," he said quietly. "That rage, that sense of betrayal that I'm not playing my role, that I'm not protecting him one more time. That's what I created. A young man who believes that his wants, his needs, his impulses matter more than anything, including other people's lives." He turned back to face the jury, ignoring his son's attorney, who was frantically whispering objections. "The truth is that my son is not a victim of circumstance or a broken home or an undeveloped brain. The truth is that Marcus is a product of my failure as a father, and that failure didn't happen in a moment. It happened over 17 years of choosing the easy path, of protecting him from consequences, of teaching him that rules were obstacles to be circumvented rather than boundaries to be respected." Marcus's face had transformed from bored indifference to genuine shock, then rapidly to rage. His hands gripped the edge of the defense table, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles stood out along his neck. For the first time in the entire trial, he was fully present, fully engaged, because for the first time something was happening that he had not anticipated and could not control. Richard Stern stood, his voice urgent. "Your Honor, I must object. This witness is clearly not in a proper state of mind to testify. I request an immediate recess so that I can confer with—" "Objection overruled," Judge Reynolds said firmly. "The witness has indicated he understands his position and wishes to continue. Mr. Holloway, you may proceed, but I caution you to answer only the questions asked." Karen Mitchell, recognizing that something extraordinary was unfolding, remained seated, her expression carefully neutral, but her mind working rapidly to adjust her strategy. This was not the testimony she had expected, but it was potentially more powerful than anything she could have elicited through cross-examination.